So the winner of every chess game, barring a mouse slip, is who asks themselves the better question throughout the game. That brings us to positional chess, the abstract part of the game. Why is it abstract? Because unlike tactics, unlike solving tactics where you're up material, you win a piece, you win a queen, you checkmate them, it's not about that. It's about square coverage, pawn structure, space, things of that nature, ideas. Which move order, right? Chess a lot of the time is a move order thing. You got to put it into chronological order. Not only do you need to find the right idea, you need to chronologize it. The game we're going to look at today is hands down the most instructive positional chess game of modern time. I looked at this game multiple times, and every single time I looked at it, I garnered a new appreciation towards it. At first, I just thought it was a beautiful game, and that it was, but then I realized how instructive it is. Through asking yourself the right questions and through going this game, take whatever your positional rating you think is and add 200 points. I promise you, the things you will learn from this game are beautiful. I was looking for a better word, but you know me, I don't sugarcoat things. This is literally the most instructive positional chess game in modern time. So let's get into it. We have Richard Rapport with the white pieces. We're going to explain who he is, how to study positional chess, which books to read at the end of the video. First, just wait. Black goes e6. How do you develop here as white? If you know anything about Rapport, he has a cool repertoire, so he plays the move bishop to e3. Bishop to e3 hits this pawn on c5. The dark squares were weakened by the e6 move, and now it's black to move. How do you guard this? You really only have one way to guard it for black, right? You can't go b6 due to this diagonal and due to the fact that the knight will come and jump here onto b5. The only way to stop knight b5 would be pawn to d5, and then the bishop comes to f4, and all of a sudden, you're just getting forked. The complications will always favor white. Black is Amin Tabatabeya, 2600 player, so he does play the right move, pawn to d6. Now what do you play? How do you restrict black from developing his pieces, right? He wants to develop and castle. Right? You can play any developmental move here and the game will be equal, but you got to play the most testing moves. You have to hand your opponent as many tests as you can throughout the game. Queen to d2. Some might think of it as a simple battery, but it's so much more. The point of this move is it restricts the movement of the knight from g8. If this knight is to move, bishop to h6 would be advantage white. You're getting rid of black's important bishop, his kingside defending bishop, and then you're just going to pummel him on the kingside if he decides to castle that way. So we get pawn to h6, very hippo-esque. Okay, we get development and knight to d4, jumping into the position. What do you do here? You should take this knight, and we'll see why. It's much common for black to have this on the king side. It's going to be the same thing as white having it on the queen side this game. Don't take with the knight. That would be a tactical blunder. And that's the funny thing. People are like, do tactics. But you do these generic chess.com tactics. Is that really making you better? Is someone tapping you on the shoulder in the middle of your tournament chess game and saying, hey, there's a tactic there? Hopefully not. From good positional chess, stem tactics, and it also gives you that sixth sense, right? Like, I feel like something's here. He takes with the bishop in order to go knight to b5, aiming at said doubled pawn. Black has to defend the pawn, and what is the weakness here in black's position? What is the weakness here in black's position? It's this pawn on d6. You don't want to give him time. So how do you apply pressure to the weakness? There's only one way. If you found queen to b4, very good job by you. Queen to b4, aiming at d6. Black's only move in this position to maintain equality and to not fall apart is bishop to f8. But I don't think anybody starts a chess game saying, hey, I'm going to fianchetto my bishop, soften the fianchetto, and then bring it back into its starting position. But it's the only way he can play. Rapport finds a beautiful move here. And what is black's idea first? Let's get into that. Black's idea is to thrust this pawn forward and gain a tempo on the queen. Rapport doesn't allow that. He goes pawn to c5. Adding yet another attacker onto d6. This pawn cannot get pushed because this one will get lost. So it's the gambit of a pawn. He gambits a pawn for square coverage for activity. And where do you put the queen? Where do you put the queen? He puts the queen on c4. You might ask, is there a difference between c4 and b3? Well, technically, yes. You're down a pawn. You don't want him to give the pawn back and open up his bishop. You would rather secure this bishop to stare at its own pawn and put the queen here on c4. Now you're attacking this pawn. Amin Tabatabai thought for over an hour in this position and played the move a6, a fine move. Let's look at what would have happened had he played bishop to e6. Why is this losing for black? The reason is queen to a4. That is the reason it is losing. If the bishop or queen come up, you just take the pawn on e5, and everything comes to life in white's position immediately. Maybe he thought for an hour because he was considering king e7 and running the king over here. Can you imagine? Can you imagine a kingside fianchetto like such? That would be disgusting. The only good move for white here is pawn f4. And this was a successful king march over here. Had we gotten this, this would have been a crazy game for a different reason. The fact that this position is balanced. But okay, we get pawn to a6. What do you do here? Don't get tunnel vision. Don't see, hey, my knight is attacked. Let me move the knight. First, see if there's anything else for you to do in the position. Right? When one side of the board is attacked, where do you think your opponent wants you to look? They want you to look at that side. So what should you do? Look at the other side. The side they don't want you to be focusing on. Knight takes e5. Simple. Simple but beautiful. Queen takes f7 is threatening checkmate. And rook to h7 is again the only move to hold equality. This position is gross. Why? Because white is playing the most testing moves as white. If you thought this was instructive, just wait for the rest of the game. The knight comes back to a3, black gives a check, and we get king to d1 stepping out of the check. Now black develops a piece. What's the best move in the position for white? You see how this pawn is pinned? What square does white kind of control here? A positional square. c4. Should your queen be on c4? I think not, so queen to b3. He wants to rotate the knight over, right? The knight is really the piece that belongs on c4, and so long as this b pawn is pinned, they can't take control of c4. So we get queen c7, right, guarding against the threat, the impending loss of a pawn, and the knight jumps to c4. Black goes rook to b8. Another positional puzzle here. How do you maintain advantage for white? Only one move. Well, think about what black just played. Black played rook to b8. Why did he play rook b8? He played the move to get out of the pin. So one can assume that he would like to go pawn to b5 and kick the knight out. So you should freeze this pawn. Deep freeze this pawn. Did you do it with the queen or the knight? Well, be a little careful. Some of you might have said knight, but why is that a problem? You have to look from above. Above POV, that knight would hang. So he does it with the queen. Understanding that he can queen trade and the quality of his pieces will just outweigh his opponents, right? For people who are like 1,000 and under, being up a queen is like the equivalent of just having a good position at top level chess. All they need is a good position because they know in the long term, good positions will pay off. And if you have a bad position, you're going to fall on your face. That's just what happens in chess. Bishop e6. How do you solidify? You want to glue the queen side, so you go pawn to a4, trying to glue it. Okay, pawn to h5. What do you do when your opponent pushes a flank pawn? Typically, you meet a flank pawn with a flank pawn push. Don't make it illogical or nonsensical. Think about it. He wants to just keep pushing. He's opening up some squares, potentially. So you just stop it on its face. h3. You might be like, technically that's not stopping it on its face. Well, it is, because if push, everything is locked. They have no counterplay on the opposite end. If you're very good on one side, do not let your opponent get play on the other side. h3 also stops any g4 that they might want. So now we get bishop to d6. Hitting the knight, what do? You move the knight to the outpost. Black cannot exactly take. You take with the knight. And look at this. Absolute clamps in the position. Absolute clamps in the position. They don't have b5 because of the beautiful rule on passant. And everything falls apart for black. I love this game. I looked at it, and every time I looked at it one more time, it got more beautiful. Bishop to c7, pawn to a5, clamps. Nothing much more to say than clamps. All right, both sides get their kings into the game to activate their rooks. Black reconnects the rooks. And now, again, another puzzle. What is the only winning idea for white? Do you think it's on the king side? Do you think it's on the queen side? What is black's weakness in the position, structure-wise? There are two. This one is weak, but that one is dealt with because you're applying pressure, so you're tying him down to the point already. But what about this one? This one doesn't look tended to. Indeed, it doesn't. So the way to compromise a pawn structure is to destabilize the base. As we say, no base, no building. No base, no building. So, you know it's on the queen side because that pawn structure is on the queen side. You know you want to attack the base. So b4 looks like a nice move. How do you prepare that? You swing the rook over. You swing the rook over because you're not playing on the king side. And he doesn't have any control over c8. All right, we go h5, but preemptive thinking, we already dealt with that in the past. g4. Bishop takes. Knight takes. Good stuff. We get knight to d7 going for the trades, but again, he understands trades are fine. See, material is even, but the position is not. Pawn to b4. If takes, you're going to win everything under the sun. So he pushes, and what do you do now? You push. Leave this pawn alone. See a pawn, take a pawn, don't do that. Don't do that. Typically, see a pawn, don't take a pawn. Pressure is good. If they push, that would just be a spite check. You put your king on c2. Now look at this. Remember this weak structure? Well, now this is the weak structure. And in order to weaken it or compromise it, you threaten the base. So boom, boom, and boom. You're going to end up winning a pawn. 2-for-1 deal. So it's the same type of weakness, right? This was weak, and c5 was the weakness. Now this is weak, but d4 is the weakness because it's the new base. So we get king to e7, rook to b4, attacking from the side, forcing one of the pawns to move, right? Because when they're next to each other, a lot of square coverage. When not a lot of square coverage. Takes, we talked about why he took and didn't push. The pawns are now isolated, but it's isolated with tempo for white. Black guards, white doubles. Why does he double? He's just simply threatening to take and win a rook. Rook to d6. All right. Don't get stuck in an idea, right? Don't get stuck in an idea. It would be a little bit of a tragedy to take because now both sides have weak pawns. You gave up a very, very strong pawn for a very, very weak pawn. Don't do that. Quality. Rook to c1. Okay. He takes, but now he took on your terms. And you had a tempo gainer in the position. So he's going back to guard the pawn. But you add pressure to the weak pawn. Rook to c7 check. And again, I'm stressing material even, but it doesn't matter. Positional chess. What do you do in this position? You have two attackers. They have two defenders. Now you have three attackers. They have two defenders. This pawn is pinned. This pawn is pinned. He has to add a defender. Silman's Endgames. Do you read it? If not, you should. One would know that the king is the best piece in the endgame. Whose king is closer to all the goods? White's king. So we get an exchange. And again, material is equal. King and 4 versus king and 4. But your king is too close. Now it is a beautiful, instructive endgame. Okay, obviously both sides are getting closer to the focal point. You don't want to be the first one to run out of pawn moves. Only winning move is pawn f3. Some people might say pawn g5. Imagine playing such a beautiful game to throw it all away like this. There is no way for either side to make progress. f3, your king is stuck. Stalemate. So, use pawn to f3. Right? If they push this pawn, you win everything. If they push this pawn, you also win everything. So they can't push a pawn. They have to move their king. Now what? Pawn to g5. Pawn to g5. You might be like, oh, I get it. Take, and, I win. No, you don't win. Because they have equal but opposite counterplay. So ironically, the clearest time of the game that it was clear black was losing is the only time he was up material. Find the winning move here. It is king on the e-file. And in this position, black resigned. A beautiful, instructive game. Tell me this was not one of the most positional games you've ever seen. The king moves. The king moves anywhere. Black loses this pawn. You run with this pawn. You can use it as a decoy. You don't have to. Whatever you want. And you froze all three of their pawns. So you're down a pawn. But endgames are not about material. They're about activity. They're about piece quality. And here, Report had all of it. A perfect game by him. The way to improve at positional chess is pick a player. Pick a player that you like, that you want to mimic their play style. Right? One player at a time. Don't get overwhelmed. Pick a player. Get a collection of all their best games. Look through those games. You'll pick up on their style. You'll pick up on their pattern recognition. Once you finish that, you pick more players. Then you make your own style. Right? Then you become a combination of all the greats that you like the best. As for books, Jacob Agard's Positional Playbook, fantastic, phenomenal. I was more of a tactical player until I read that. Now, I'd like to think I have both. Silman's Endgames is an absolute must-read. You're going to cruise through the first 60 to 100 pages, but then take your time. The thing about Endgames is you need to read the book so that you've fully absorbed every single word on that page. If you have not, you don't know it. So you have to go slowly. I don't care if a page takes a day, 2 days, a week. Do not move on until it makes a perfect amount of sense. How do you practice this stuff? Well, for endgames, it's easy. You get a theoretical endgame. You don't have anybody, you don't have any friends that play the game, doesn't matter. You set it up on board editor, you play out an engine. You can't beat the engine in the theoretical win, then you don't know it. So re-review it until you do know it, and then you can flex on the engine and say, I beat you when I should have. I know my stuff. Let me know if you guys want more positional videos. I've been requested this a couple of times. I know people have a bunch of trouble, and it might not be as fun as tactics, but it's just as important, if not more, because for the final time, tactics stem from good positional chess. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.